Okay, guys. So today we're gonna be, and this week we're gonna be working on the listening section. Last week we did the reading part, and now we're gonna start the listening section. Okay. Reading is very similar to the listening. I would say it's easier than the listening, um, especially because we practice listening a lot. It's probably the skill that we have mastered the most, listening. So obviously, there's a difference between just watching a movie and doing the TOEFL listening. It's more academic, so maybe you need more vocabulary for it. But in general, it's usually the section where students get the highest scores. Okay? Now let's see. In the listening section, if you guys remember, how many passages, how many sets of questions did we have in the reading section? Does anyone remember? You don't? We had 3 or 4, right? You had those 2 options, 3 or 4. And it depended on where you have your extra questions. The thing is, in the TOEFL test that you take, you will always have some extra questions. Those could go in the reading or in the listening, but it will always be there. Now, we said, if that extra question is in the reading, that means that you will be having 4 questions or 4 passages in the reading. So if it's in the reading, then obviously your listening will be shorter. You won't have that extra in the listening anymore. So if you have 4 passages in the reading, that means that you don't have anything extra in the listening. You will only have 5 tasks or 5 sets of questions in the listening. However, if you don't have the extra passage in the reading, then you will have the extra questions in the listening. So you will be having 7 tasks or 7 sets of questions, okay? So to summarize, you can have 5 or 7, depending where you get the extra questions. The types of questions you have, the types of audio files you will be listening to in the listening section are conversations, 1, and lectures, right? You guys should be familiarized with this word. What were lectures? Does anyone remember? What are lectures? A lecture is a class, right? In this case, you will be hearing university classes. So you will hear a professor discuss a topic in the lectures. And in the conversations, it's a conversation between 2 people. We will talk about it in a minute. But basically, those are the 2 things you'll be hearing: conversations and lectures. Okay? Now, as for the time, first thing I want to tell you, don't worry too much about the time. Honestly, I think like not even 1% of students struggle with time in the listening section. It isn't the same as in the reading. Usually timing in the reading is like a problem, right? You're there like focusing too much on managing your time, making enough time. But in the listening, you don't have that problem. Okay, listening is quite faster than reading. You even have some additional minutes, and I promise that at the end of your listening, you will still have some extra time. Okay, so you don't have to worry too much about time in the listening. However, it's important that you guys know you have 41 minutes if you get 5 sets of questions, and 57 minutes if you get 7 sets of questions, okay? Now, another thing that is important to say, don't expect a separate timer per conversation or per lecture. You are the ones in charge of organizing your time. You will be given the 41 or 57 minutes for the entire listening. So it's completely up to you how you manage your time. You have to be wise. You cannot be spending more than 8 minutes per conversation or per lecture. So that is the number that you have to remember. 8 minutes per conversation or per lecture, that's the maximum time you can spend in a conversation or lecture. Okay, guys? Any questions about the structure then? Is it clear? Is it? Okay, guys. Now, moving on. Today and tomorrow, we're going to be only focusing and only doing conversations, okay? Today we'll do the theory, tomorrow we'll practice. And on Tuesday and Friday, on Thursday and Friday, we'll be doing lectures, okay? So Thursday is going to be our theory class for lectures, and Friday we'll practice. So let's start then with conversations. This is honestly the easiest part in the listening, and I would even say in the entire topic. Okay, you'll see. So you have to listen to these 3-minute long conversations. They are around that time. Of course, it can be more, it can be less. It could be 2 minutes or 4, but it's in average 3 minutes long. And second thing, you get 5 questions per conversation. Okay, so each conversation you hear, you will have 5 questions about it. And the good thing is you only hear speaking to people. Any questions about that? No questions? Okay, guys. Now, before we start looking at examples, you know how in the reading section we went through every type of question and we did some strategies to answer them? Here in the listening, we won't be doing that because it's not really necessary. You will notice when we get to the examples that it'll be okay. However, just so that you have like an overview of what the questions are, these are the types of questions you get. This is for both conversations and lectures. In the conversations, which is what we're doing today, first thing, the first question that you usually get is the main idea type of question that is going to ask you about what the main idea of the conversation was. Okay? So for that question, you don't really need to have any notes. If you think about it, it's just going to stay there. Then you have attitude questions, which sometimes ask you for like how somebody feels about something. So how does the speaker feel about this? What's the attitude that the speaker has towards this? So they are about feelings, emotions, attitudes. Again, you don't need your notes. Then you have inference questions and function and purpose questions that basically ask you, like, they play against some part from the conversation and they're like, so what does this person mean when they said this, And in that case, you just have to use your logic. You will be hearing that part again. So again, you don't need your notes for either of those questions. It's all about being logical. And finally, the only one that you do need your notes for is detailed questions. This is the one that would be maybe the hardest one because they will ask you about specific details from the conversation, like what time does this happen? What is the name of this book that was mentioned? What is the name of the professor who was mentioned? What is the number of students that were joining this call? So the detailed questions ask you for specific details from the conversation, and that is the only one that will require for you to take notes. Now, why am I saying this? My biggest tip in terms of note-taking for the conversations only would be don't focus too much on taking notes. You don't need to take as many notes. You can even answer the questions without taking notes at all. If you are going to take notes, make sure that you only do so for the details in the conversation. So those are the only things that you should be worried about, that you should be worrying about having in your notes. Everything else, you will know because the vocabulary is simple, the ideas are simple. You will see that it's quite simple to understand the conversation. Maybe the hardest part is to remember the details, and that's why you can take notes. Okay, guys? That's going to be my number 1 tip here. Any questions so far? Okay. Now, but what happens? How are these conversations going to go? It's really important. These conversations, 100% of the time, are going to be between a student from a certain university. So this is a student that goes to one X university in the US. So it's always like the academic structure of an American university. And this student is going to be speaking or talking to somebody that works in the university. Okay, we're gonna say it's a campus worker, so somebody that works in campus. This person could be anyone. It could be a professor from the university, it could be the librarian, it could be a secretary, it could be the dean, it could be the international department officer, the housing officer, anyone that works in the university, okay? Now, what happens? What will you have in the conversation? The first common type of conversations you have is problem advice, okay? So how is this? Basically, this is the most common one. The student has a problem and goes to see somebody that works in the university to ask for advice on what the student can do to solve the problem. So let's imagine some situations. And in order to do this, and in order to have good vocabulary and to improve your understanding, I'm going to give you one tip, and this is for the entire TOEFL test. Since this is usually used for applying to universities in the States, then it's important to know, to have an idea or some context about how life works, how university life works in the United States, okay, in America. So basically, just because it's different, you know, the academic structure we have like here in South America than the one that's used in the US. So it's important to have an understanding of, it's very simple, you know, but just to have an idea of how it works. So what can you guys say? What problems do you think that a student can have? Can you try to give me some examples of problems that a student can have?
Schedule problems.
Okay, schedule problems. Like, do you mean with a class, with a club?
Yeah, I mean, when two classes are set at the same time.
Exactly. Yes, that's a really good problem. So maybe the student has this problem. Maybe their classes are overlapping. So in that case, who do you think the student is gonna go talk to solve this problem or to ask for help? Who in the university? Maybe the academic advisor. Academic advice, right? So maybe like this is the person in charge of like helping students take their classes and depending on their major and choosing their major and doing their schedules and stuff. So maybe if the student is having this problem that two classes are overlapping, they're probably gonna go and talk to the academic advisor about that, right? So, right, that's a good example. What could be another example of a problem that a student can have? What could it be?
Abandonment of subjects.
Okay. Like, what do you mean?
For example, when a student has a lot of subjects and he or she doesn't have much time to study for each of them, so he or she decides to abandon one subject so that he or she can have more time to study the others.
Great, probably, yeah, that's a good example too. In that case, maybe the same person, right, would be the one. So maybe the student, as Ricardo says, doesn't have a lot of time and they want to drop certain classes. They're gonna go and talk to the academic advisor probably. Right? Now, there are other areas as well, right? Like not related to the academic part. Maybe the student has a problem with accommodation. Maybe the student doesn't like their roommate. You know, maybe they're not like, they don't get along well, or maybe the roommate is like bringing people to the room or to the dorm. So that could be another problem. In that case, then the student is gonna go and talk to the accommodation officer and say, I have this problem, what can I do? You know, and then the accommodation officer is gonna give the student some suggestions. Like, one, you can try changing dorms. Second, maybe you have to wait 1 semester to do that. Maybe you can request a roommate change, or maybe you can rent an apartment outside the campus. So that's kind of how it's gonna be. Maybe the student has problems related to meals. So maybe the student is a vegetarian and they have forgotten to select a vegetarian meal plan when they were like subscribing for the meal plan. Maybe that could be a problem. Many things that, or maybe the student just wants something. You know, sometimes it isn't really a problem, but the student desires something. Maybe the student wants to join a club. So the student is gonna go and talk to the club leader about this. So that is one of the biggest structures that you can have. And you can have different people, right? Maybe if the student has a problem with a class or an assignment, they're gonna go and talk to the professor, the librarian. Maybe the student has a problem finding a book, so they will go and talk to the librarian. There are many things that can happen, many people they can be talking to. Okay, but it's always gonna be like that. Now, the second big structure is information, and it's just information. So what do I mean by that? Sometimes the student doesn't really need anything, doesn't really have any problems, but the student requires information. So maybe you have a transfer student that's new in the university and would like to know how the library works, how they can to borrow books or something like that. Maybe the student wants information about a class or about their major or about studying abroad or an exchange program or an internship, that kind of thing. Okay, so in that structure, it's a little bit different because you don't have suggestions. You have like a questionnaire. You have different questions and answers to those questions. Okay, so that is a lot of details that you need to take. Is that okay, guys? Do you have any questions about what we said so far? Nope. All right. So without further ado, let's just go to an example. Okay, guys, we're gonna do this one. Please get a piece of paper and a pen. We're gonna listen to this conversation and then we'll answer the questions. Okay, it says listen to the conversation and answer the questions. Are you guys ready to take notes? Are you? Another thing. Sorry, before I forget, when you guys are taking notes, and this is only for the conversations, please try to have your notes organized. You don't need a lot of space because remember I told you not to take so many notes from the conversations. The main thing here is understanding. You will only have 1 or 2 detailed questions, and they're usually not that tough either. So the best thing you can do is focus on understanding and your notes, like they're going a secondary plane. Now, the second thing, one way you can take your notes is doing something like this. Let's say this is your piece of paper. Try to divide it into 2 and try to have a separate like space to have your notes about what the student says. And another one, notes from what the professor says, or the professor, like the campus work. Okay? So for example, let's say the student has a problem with accommodation. So I don't like my roommate. So you're gonna maybe draw like a sad face sticker and say roommate. So the problem is that the student doesn't like the roommate. Now you're gonna go to the other side and First of all, like write down how the professor feels about that, or how the campus worker feels about that. Maybe the officer is like, well, but why didn't you choose your roommate like, why didn't you choose somebody that you knew from the beginning, and we recommend this to students a lot, and you should be careful when choosing your roommate and whatever. So the first thing is like how the professor feels about that. Maybe the professor is a little bit like questioning the student's decision. So maybe you can write that down, even if it isn't something that they are explicitly saying, write it down, because they are going to ask you sometimes about feelings and emotions and how the professor or the campus worker feels, right? So it's important to write those things down and write down the suggestions, right? Maybe the first suggestion is, well, you can change dorms, but you have to wait 1 semester. And then you're going to go back to the student and write down how the student feels about that. So the student doesn't like that idea. So we're going to draw an X because, I don't know, it's urgent. The student is really in a rush and wants to change roommates as fast as he can. So something like that. And then you go back to the suggestion, right? So the second suggestion is rent an apartment outside of the campus. So maybe the student isn't happy about that either because it's too expensive. So we're going to say too expensive. Right? So we're going back and forth between the student and the campus work. Or writing down the most important things. Obviously, if we have details, like you have to wait 1 semester, you have to go to this website, you have to go to see this person at this time. We're going to write down those details. That is the most important part. But if you guys plan on taking notes, then try to have them like this, okay? Organized on the left and on the right, and you'll have your notes for the different speakers you have. Is this okay? Do you have any questions about this? Yes, no? Okay, guys. So yeah, now we can move forward. I'm gonna play the conversation. Please take notes. And let's go.
Everything all right, Carla?
Yes, I just wanted to talk to you about the assignment that's due on Monday.
I can't give you an extension if that's what you want.
No, it's not that. I wanted to ask you about the word limit. At the moment, I'm way over it, but I found so many useful sources that I don't really want to cut anything out.
Well, it's meant as a guide rather than a hard and fast rule. It's not as if I'll stop marking as soon as I reach the word limit. But I don't really want you to go way over it either. 2,800 is the absolute maximum, I'd say.
Wow, that's still going to be hard.
Well, you can use this opportunity to try to make your writing more succinct. It's good exercise in writing technique. Think about which of the writer's points you really want to draw attention to, and discard any information that isn't really relevant to your premise.
Okay, I'll try that.
Remember, you can always refer to 2 or more sources in the same paragraph, in the same sentence even.
What do you mean?
If one of your citations seems to complement what the other says, you can refer to them at the same time. You can do that when they contradict each other, too. It's a perfectly acceptable way of constructing a paragraph.
I get you. Well, I'd better go. I've got a lot to do before Monday.
Hang on, Carla. While you're here, I wanted to mention something to you.
What's that?
Have you heard about the Harvey Graduate Business Program?
No.
It's a special scheme funded by the Harvey Group, the financial place in town.
Yeah, I know it.
Well, they have a special program that they run especially for graduates. It's very exclusive. They only take on 3 people a year. Each of the major colleges in the state is invited to put forward a maximum of 5 students a year for consideration. And we only pick out the very best students, the ones with really high grades. I wondered if you'd be interested in trying out for it. After all, you've been doing well in all your modules.
Wow, it sounds like an honor to be considered. I guess all those late nights working on assignments were worth it. What does the program give you?
Well, you get work and training at the Harvard Group for a year, and then they will fund your master's course a year down the line. I'm right that you're interested in doing a master's course, aren't I?
Yes, I was considering doing something management-based.
Well, I think they discuss with you what master's course would be best for you and them, depending on the department you're working on. So you may be obliged to do the course that they want you to do, but it's bound to be useful. Then they employ you for another year. And after that, you can choose to stay with the company or move on somewhere else.
Harvey's a prestigious company. I couldn't see myself moving on fast if I managed to get my foot in the door.
Indeed. Well, is it something that might appeal to you?
Maybe. I was hoping to go abroad for a while, though. What do I have to do to apply? Do I need a resume? I was working on mine just the other night.
Well, there's a rather lengthy application form to fill out, so I don't think a resume is needed. Then, if you get through the first stage, you'll have to do a presentation. If they like you, they'll invite you back for an interview. It's pretty tough, as you can imagine, but I wouldn't suggest it to you if I didn't think you could do it. I mean, you've done some great presentations in class, and you've had the experience of setting up your own business, too.
No. I haven't done that.
Haven't you? I thought you did something selling perfumes.
That's Miranda.
Oh, is it? Well, sorry about that. My mistake. But you've still had experience working in a business, haven't you?
Yeah, I've worked in my dad's office in the vacations.
Well, that's very valuable, and I'm sure you learned a lot from that. Well, if you're interested in the program, come to my office later on, and I'll give you the details. After 4 is best for me.
Thanks.
Everything all right, Carla?
Okay, guys. That was the conversation. So, what do you guys think? Was it easy to understand, easy to follow? The vocabulary was good? Is it okay, too complex? Kind of so. Okay, guys. Before we get into the questions, what was it about? The student had a problem, right? What was the student's problem?
Maybe the word limit in her assignment.
Exactly. She couldn't meet the word limit. She was going a little bit over it. That was her problem. And she wanted to see what she could do. And the professor gave some suggestions, right? You probably know what those suggestions are. And they talk about it for a while, and then they change the subject, right? And they start talking about something else. So what do they start talking later? What do they say later?
He told her about a business program in a university.
Exactly. Yes. So they were discussing, the professor told the student about this opportunity, and they were discussing like the information about it, right? The details, like what is it, how long it lasts, what she has to do to apply, what requirements they ask for students, something like that. Now let's answer the questions. Okay, it's already done. I'm gonna refresh it. Let's answer the questions. Another thing, you will only be able to see the questions one by one. Okay, so you don't get them all at once, and you cannot answer at the same time as you're listening. You'll get them one by one, and you have to click next to move on to the next page. And yes, you cannot answer at the same time as you're listening. You were wondering. So question number 1, it says, maybe Ricardo, could you please read the question?
Carla wants to talk to the professor because.
Okay, guys, so we have these 4 options, 1, 2, 3, and 4. What do you guys think? Which one is the correct?
I think it's option 3.
Okay. Valentina agrees. What about Chris? Mateo, you too?
Yeah, I think it's option 3.
All right, Henry. Okay.
Maybe number 3.
Number 3, and Evelyn?
Maybe number 3.
So we all agree it's 3, correct? And yes, this is what Valentina was saying, right? She's worried that her assignment is too long. It has to do with the word limit. She's going over it. So the tips that I can give you for this first question, first type of question, the main idea one. So first of all, make sure that you read the question. You don't only know that it's the first question and skip right into the options. So sometimes it happens, you are so used to the structure, you know that usually the first one is the main idea, and you start reading the options and you choose the one that you consider is a good summary of the entire conversation. But the main idea type of question could be different, differently phrased. In this case, for example, they're asking about the original problem, the initial problem. They're not asking for a summary of what the conversation was about in general. They're saying, why did Carla go to see the professor? So what was the initial problem she had? They're not asking for a summary of the entire thing, but it could be the other way around. So it could be something like, what was the conversation mainly about? And maybe there you will have two things, right? Carla's assignment and this opportunity with the business partner. So make sure that you always read the question, that you answer it. And second, try to be logical about it as well. You know that, for example, in this case, this isn't an official TOEFL ETS practice set. But sometimes in the TOEFL test, you have options that are way out of context. Like if you know that Carla was speaking to her professor, then probably she didn't go to see the professor because she wanted to discuss something about accommodation or about the library, right? So you're gonna find those out of context options. Make sure that you identify and eliminate them, okay? Those will be some tips for the first question. Hello, guys. Are you there? Okay. I'm really sorry. I don't know what happened. My connection just went out. Please let's continue. So we were doing question number 2. It says, read the 6 sentences below. We have from 1 to 6. Which 2? We gotta choose 2 options. Does the professor advise Garda to do? So this has to do with the suggestions he gives. Okay, guys? So let's look at the 6 options. And we need to choose 2. We have 1 and 3, 2 and 4, 5 and 6, 3 and 4, or 1 and 6. What do you guys think?
I think it's 2 and 4.
Okay, you just need this information from each source and discard information from less reliable sources. Okay. What about the rest? What do you guys think? Is it 2 and 4? Do you all agree? Valentina?
I'm between 1 and 3 and also 2 and 4, but I'm not sure which one is.
Okay, so you have 4 options in that case. What about you, Mateo?
I think it's 1 and 3.
Right, Henry?
I think is 3 and 4.
Right, and Evelyn?
I think is 4 or 2 and 4.
3 and 4 or 2 and 4, right? Okay, guys. So first of all, remember in listening, I told you that you usually you won't have problems with time. Now, the thing is, even like in this case, you shouldn't be spending too much time in a question in the listening, because there's nothing you can do, right? It's not like in the reading. Remember in the reading, you had a question and you could go back and read a paragraph again, read the passage, look for the answer there. So you had that material to work with. You had the passage there. But in this case, you cannot play the audio game. So the only thing you can do is just answer based on your notes and your memory, right? And if you have nothing, if you really don't know, then take the best guess you can. Do something that makes sense, that you feel is correct, something that feels right. Because our memory sometimes works like that, especially in the listening. So we listen to something, even if we are not conscious that we know the answer, maybe subconsciously something will tell you what could be the answer. So don't spend too much time in these questions. You just need to look at your notes, see if you have something related to this, see what you have. Try to think about it if you remember or not, and that's it. It's gonna take you 1 minute. It shouldn't take you more than that. So let's go for 1 and 3. It was 1 and 3. So make your writing more concise. The professor says you should try make your writing more succinct, which is a synonym of the word concise. Focus on understanding, not too much on taking notes. So just understand that the professor felt the student should try to write better. In other words, right? Be not so redundant. Writing in fewer words, the same thing, but in fewer words, which makes sense, right? And number 3, focus on comparing and contrasting information. And this was useful because she wouldn't have to use too many references in one paragraph, right? So she could just use one reference and compare and contrast the info from that. So this is a detailed question. It should be on your notes, details. We have question 3. It says the Harvard Graduate Business Program provides young people with. We have these 4 options. What do you guys think?
I believe it's the first one.
Okay, Henry?
The option 2.
To overseas work experience, Evelyn?
Number 1.
Okay.
Maybe number 1.
Okay. Valentina?
I got lost in this part, so I don't know.
So make a guess.
Maybe the first one.
Okay. Why did you get lost? Was it because it was a bit difficult to understand the vocabulary, or was it simply because it happens sometimes that we get distracted, right? We listen to the first 2 minutes, and we're totally focused and we're taking good notes. And then it gets to the 3rd minute and you're already starting to get lost. And then by the 4th minute, you're not even paying attention. So why did you get lost? What do you mean by that?
In this part, the professor was speaking faster and I didn't understand.
Okay. So if that is your problem, one tip I can give you for that, practice listening. So go to YouTube, look for lectures like this, or in this case, conversations, but lectures will be useful too for the next part. And try to, you know that in YouTube you have the option of playing it in different speeds. So try to be working with that. So start by working it in a normal speed. And if it's too fast for you, then maybe you can go back 1. And from time to time, you're gonna be getting used to the idea of listening to that speed, and then you go basically leveling it up, so that could be a good tip for that. Okay, guys, so let's go for 1. I think that was the most voted, but it's not a funded master's course. They do offer a master's course, but I'm not sure if it's of their choice. Who's there? This isn't so understandable, right? Because the students cannot choose the course. The group is gonna be choosing the masters for the students, right? That is something the professor says. If we show the script, it says, they discuss with you what master's course would be best for you, and then depending on the department you're working in, right? So you may be obliged to do the course they want you to do. So they basically choose for you. They don't give you the option to choose. Overseas work experience, I don't think it's overseas. It's in the same country, if I'm not wrong. So it was a total of 2 years employment, because at the end of the day, with or without the master's course, you're gonna be working there for 2 years. They employ you for 1 year, and then I think the other one is optional, but you have the option to be employed there for 2 years. Okay, so again, this is detailed questions. So details should be on your notes. What about this? Let's listen to this question. It says, listen to Carla. Carla says, Harvey is a prestigious company. I couldn't see myself moving on fast if I managed to get my foot in the door. What does Carla mean by this? I couldn't see myself moving on fast if I managed to get my foot in the door. So please look at the options. This is a function or purpose type of question. What do you think she means? Ricardo, what do you think?
I'm not sure, but it could be the fourth.
Okay, last one. Mateo?
Option 3.
Option 3, Evelyn?
The option 3.
Okay, so I think majority goes for option 3, which is correct. If I got a job at Harvey's, I wouldn't want to leave the company for some time. You know, first of all, this is a conditional sentence. It says, if I manage to get my foot in the door. So there's a huge difference between saying, if I can do this versus once I do it, right? When you say, if I can do it, if I get a job, then you're open to the possibility. It could happen or it couldn't, but we don't know, right? 50-50. But when you say, once I do this or once I get the job, then you're assuring, you're 100% sure that you will get the job. And Carla doesn't know, right? Carla says, if I can do it. And she even uses this phrase, if I manage to. So if I manage to get the job, right? If I manage to get my foot in the door, that isn't like a literal expression, right? She doesn't really mean like if she literally like walks in the door, walks in the office. But if she gets the job and if she manages to get it, it means that it's gonna require some work. So we could discard or we could eliminate the first and the last, right? Because she's not sure. It's an if, it's a conditional. And second, if I get a job or if I got the job, I couldn't see myself moving on fast means I don't think I would want to move on to another place, to another company, or to another job. So I wouldn't want to leave the company for some time, right? This has the opposite connotation. It's like, you know, this has a positive connotation. Harvey's a prestigious company. It's a good company. I wouldn't want to move on fast. But option B, or like the second one, has a negative one, right? I wouldn't have to work there forever. It's like, it's not such a good company, but I wouldn't have to work there forever. So careful with those things, okay? So after and once are not the same as saying if. Is that okay? Any questions so far? And finally, we have the last one. Which one of these does Carla not need to do? This is a detailed question, so try to remember or look at your notes. What is something she doesn't need to do?
The first one.
Yes, right? Sending a resume. Right. The other things are mentioned, and the first one is mentioned, but something that she doesn't have to do. I don't think you have to send in your resume, the professor says. So that's gonna be it. We got 4 out of 5. That's a pretty good score for our first try, I'd say. Tomorrow we're gonna practice. We're just gonna focus on practicing. So we'll do different types of conversations. So that this is all understood. Okay, guys, do you have any questions before we leave? Is it all okay? Yes. Okay, guys, thank you. So please, before you go, don't forget to fill out today's survey. And I'll see you tomorrow on our practice class.
Thank you, teacher. Goodbye.
Bye, teacher.
Bye, teacher.
Bye, teacher. Thank you.
Bye, teacher. Thank you.
Evening.